And now, to welcome the President and the First Lady, we have a special surprise. Dean Ezra Latterman, the Dean of the School of Music and one of the world's greatest composers, has composed, especially for this occasion, a fanfare in honor of Bill and Hillary. It is entitled A Fanfare for the Uncommon Couple.
Hopefully some of them will.
to ask you to please take your seats so we can commence the program. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joe Mandel, Yale Law School class of 1964, and I'm president of the Yale Law School Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this wonderful and exciting event. As I indicated, this is the annual meeting of the Yale Law School Association. And that means we do have some preliminaries before we get to the main event. I hope you'll try to curb your excitement so that we can do those matters expeditiously. In fact, I think it would be helpful if you try to heed the words of a current Yale Law School student, words I heard when she was interviewed on television shortly after my arrival in New Haven Thursday night. The reporter asked the young lady whether all of the Yale Law School students weren't bubbling over with excitement at the prospect of the President and the First Lady arriving in town. And she responded, well, it's nice that they're coming, but here at the Yale Law School, each of us knows that someday she or he will also be a celebrity, so we're not terribly excited. Tradition at the annual meeting of the Yale Law School Association to introduce those alumni present who have traveled from foreign countries, and I would like to do that with your indulgence. Here from England are Amy Glickman, class of 1988, and Clifford Dammers, class of 1969. From the Bahamas, Richard Colson, class of 1957. From India, Ms. Kroshi Mukherjee, LLM, class of 1973. From Bermuda, Ned Heiser, class of 1954. From Mexico, George Orvolia, LLM, class of 1964. From Belgium, Fred Heller, class of 1973, and Stefan Roosdegen, class of 1966. From Saudi Arabia, Mohammed Al-Muhim, class of 1970. From France, Joseph Ash, class of 1983, Thomas Johnson, class of 1963, Maurice Latoul, class of 1948, Christopher Mesnu, class of 1983, and Yvette Teofan, class of 1988. From Japan, Ivy Machida, class of 1966. From Ireland, Patrick Park, LLM, class of 1981. And from Thailand, William Klausner, class of 1953. You join me in welcoming our foreign visitors. I would also like to take this opportunity to note there are 25 alumni present who are so-called legal eagles. A legal eagle is someone who graduated from Yale Law School more than 50 years ago. 8 of those 25 are here for the reunion class of 1938. Join me in welcoming those 25 legal eagles.
And now it is my pleasure to unveil
The portrait of the President of the United States, a member of a class of 1973 of the Yale Law School, William Jefferson Clinton. It is a strange custom of the Yale Law School that the dean is not permitted to say anything about the recipient of a medal. Deans who have tried in the past have often been cut down by the person who was to present the recipient because that was his or her job. Now that makes life very difficult for me because I'd like to say something about the recipient. And deans are not generally known for keeping their mouths shut. Person. Brilliant, I knew. Decent, I knew. But what a wonderful human being. When I say that she is everything that this law school strives for, I say something very real, and I set standards for this law school that are extraordinarily high. To present the medal to the President of the United States, I give you Hillary Rodham Clinton of the class of 72.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Dean Calabrese, for that much too kind introduction. But most of all, thank you for the leadership you have given to this law school that those of us in this great hall not only love, but are very grateful. Thank you for helping to continue the traditions of the Yale Law School through times of change, much like what is going on now throughout our society, where we have to balance continuity and change every day. When I was asked to come to present the medal, I thought that the dean was actually going to introduce the medal recipient, and that I would, as is appropriate, be there to hand the medal off. I didn't fully realize until relatively recently, like about 2 minutes ago, that the dean was, through some arcane tradition, forbidden to talk about the medal recipient, putting me in a somewhat awkward position of introducing someone about whom I could say many, many things, and tell you many, many stories about our times together at Yale Law School, and would do so if the press would all take a vow of silence during the process. But I will try to restrain myself and get immediately to the business at hand. It is true that I owe a great deal to the Yale Law School. I owe some of the friendships of my life. I owe some of the greatest intellectual challenges that I can imagine. I owe a sense of commitment and dedication and an understanding of how one marries the rule of law to a changing and dynamic society in which all of us are challenged constantly to reapply that. And yet, probably above all else, I owe the Yale Law School the opportunity I had to meet my husband. It is something that has now been talked about in many different formats. I was privileged to speak to the alumni last year and just spoke briefly about some of the mythology that has grown up around my meeting the President of the United States in an earlier incarnation. It is great fun to pull out the pictures of what we both looked like then. And both of our hairstyles were quite different, I would like to add. It is also great fun to reminisce with our many friends from the class of 73 and 72, the class I started in, about those times, those exciting, anguishing, difficult, exhilarating times. And it is for me a special honor to be able to come back to this setting in front of so many people, former professors and classmates, leaders of the legal profession and academic law, leaders in government, and to know that we are all in some way joined by a common bond, one that stretches both backwards and forwards, but which is anchored in this law school and what it has meant to each of us. And what I would greatly like to be able to do is to introduce someone who, for me, even in those long ago days, represented much of what is best about the law in this place, but in a different kind of style. There weren't many people at the Yale Law School then who came from a place called Hope, Arkansas. There weren't many people who intended to return to a place called Arkansas. We used to have long conversations in the dining room that went on for, it seemed, days, but probably were only hours, in which we all solved the problems of the world and were constantly struck by how rooted and absolutely committed to doing something about them was the president. His easy manner and his friendliness often led him to be somewhat looked at quizzically by those of us who were, and still remain, slightly more intense. And we often had long conversations about how we would each make our contribution to the country that we loved, even when in the midst of the 1960s and early 1970s, there seemed so much about this beloved country that needed changing. And through it all, what always struck me was how generous of spirit the president was. He was someone who, when a classmate had to go home because of an illness in a family and come back and study for an exam, would stay up all night to make sure that person did well. And then, of course, slightly rue the fact the person did better than he did, despite his health. But the personal relationships that we were privileged to enjoy then have sustained us over the years. There has not been a better, stronger, more loyal extended family than the classes that we both participated in. We are grateful to all of our classmates and our friends, and we hope that as we move forward together in the next years of this presidency, that each of you will feel a part of what we are trying to do together, that you will not only remain our supporters, but our best and most constructive critics, that you will help us know the directions we should be taking and how best to arrive at the destination of a society that is stabler, better rooted, more optimistic and hopeful about the future. And so for all of the many personal reasons and the public ones that all of us now know, I am very honored to present this medal to my husband, my classmate, and the President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. My good friend, Guido and Ann Calabrese, President and Mrs. Levin, Mr. Mandel, and all the people at the head table. Let me say a special word of thanks to the artist who did that wonderful portrait, unduly flattering. Also, a gifted flack. You see, he's got me holding Stephen Carter's book, The Cultural Disbelief. We now know he took no money from Yale because Carter took care of him. Actually, I'm deeply honored to be holding that book. I read it and I loved it, and the dean said that a person ought to be painted with the book he's read, since no one is very often. I thank Mr. Letterman for that wonderful fanfare for Hillary and for me. I enjoyed it very much. As far as I know, it's the first piece of music ever written for someone who is a mediocre musician but loves music greatly. I want to say, too, to all of my former professors, to my classmates, and to my friends here, I thank each and every one of you for the contributions you made to my life and the Hillary's, and to the work you did to make it possible for me to be here today. Thank you, Dean, for mentioning our friend Neil Steinman, who doubled the IQ of every room he ever walked into. And I thank all my classmates who are here who contributed to the last campaign in so many and wonderful ways. I also want to say a special word of thanks to the people who taught me in class and to the people I just knew in the halls who were on the faculty at Yale Law School. It was a rich experience for me that I still remember very vividly. I was especially glad to see my fellow Southerner, Professor Myers McDougall, out there. I'm delighted to see you here today. Thank you for coming today. My wife did a magnificent job today, as she always does. This is our 20th reunion, and Monday will be our 18th anniversary. And it's been a humbling experience, you know. I mean, she was so great talking about health care on television week before last, and having the country follow an issue that we have cared about for so long. And shortly after that, the U.S. News or somebody, USA Today, had the poor grace to commission a poll in which 40% of the American people opined in an opinion agreed with by 100% of our classmates and faculty members here that she was smarter than I am. Just when I was beginning to feel at home in the job. Then, as if to add insult to injury, I went to California and did a town meeting on television and went down to LA, and I was very excited. They put me at the Beverly Hilton, and I knew Merv Griffin owned it, and I thought, well, maybe he'll come out and say hi, and I'll begin to really feel like a president again. And sure enough, he did. He came out and said hello, and there he was, and he said, I put you on the floor where I thought you belonged. You have a very nice suite, but there is one permanent resident of the floor, and he'll be there to greet you when you get there. So my imagination was running wild. I got up to the floor where the suite was, and guess who the permanent resident is? Rodney Dangerfield. And he met me there, gave me a dozen roses with a card that said, "A little respect." You know, I was thinking, just sitting here, about the incredible events that our country has seen unfold in the last 3.5 weeks at home and abroad, the developments in the Middle East and in Russia, the efforts we are making here to deal with health care, and the signing of the National Service Bill, which was one of the things that drove me into the campaign for president, the efforts we're making to pass the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, the continuing troubles of Somalia, and I was thinking about what it was like 20 years ago when we were here. A time of student demonstrations when we were about to get out of Vietnam and about to get up to our ears in Watergate, when the culture of heavy rock music and drugs began to blur the sensibilities of a lot of Americans. And I noticed last night when I was reading a book on that time